November 24th, 1986, New York City. A bankruptcy petition lands on the desk of a federal judge. The name on the filing, United States Lines. This was no ordinary company. It once owned the largest passenger liner on Earth. Its ships carried 94,000 American soldiers to the battlefields of World War I. Its flagship still holds the transatlantic speed record. No cruise ship has ever beaten it. During the coldest years of the Cold War, the Pentagon counted on it as a secret weapon. And now it owed $1.3 billion. In 1986, that number made it one of the largest bankruptcies in American shipping history. 43 ships, thousands of employees, an entire row of piers in New York Harbor. All of it gone. But here's the real twist. The man who drove this company into the ground was the same man who changed the shipping industry forever. His name was Malcolm McLean. This is the story of a company, but it's also the story of how a nation rose to dominate the seas, ruled them, and then destroyed itself from within. Part 1. Empire of Spoils. To understand how United States Lines began, you have to go back to 1917. That year, the United States declared war on Germany. Docked at the piers of Hoboken, New Jersey, sat a fleet of German ocean liners. Their crews never had time to sail them home. The American government seized every one of them. The biggest prize was a ship called Vaterland. Built by the Hamburg America Line, Vaterland displaced 54,000 tons and stretched nearly 1,000 feet from bow to stern. Before she was seized, she had crossed the Atlantic only 7 times. The U.S. Navy took her over and converted her into a troop ship. President Woodrow Wilson personally chose her new name, Leviathan, the sea monster from the Bible. After the war ended, these captured German ships became a problem. Who would run them? In 1921, the United States Shipping Board created an organization to manage this fleet of war trophies. That organization became United States Lines. One of its co-founders was Kermit Roosevelt, the son of President Theodore Roosevelt. The company started with 3 ships, 2 of which, America and George Washington, were seized German vessels. This was the origin of United States Lines. Not built, taken. Throughout the 1920s, the company kept growing. More ships were acquired and renamed after American presidents. President Harding, President Roosevelt, President Monroe. Every name dripped with national ambition. In post-war America, rebuilding the merchant fleet was a matter of policy. Every ocean liner flying the Stars and Stripes was a floating billboard for American power. In 1923, Leviathan completed a massive refit and re-entered service as the company's flagship. She was the largest passenger ship on the Atlantic, bigger than anything White Star or Cunard could offer. The company looked unstoppable. But underneath the surface, cracks were forming. Throughout the 20s, United States Lines bled money. Running these enormous ships cost a fortune, and government subsidies couldn't cover the gap. By March 1929, the company had to be sold to P.W. Chapman Company. 7 months later, Wall Street crashed. The Great Depression had arrived. Part 2. The Twilight of the Leviathan. Leviathan was an unlucky ship. Born in Germany, raised by war, she never quite found her place in peacetime. The transatlantic route in the 1920s was a brutal competition. Britain's Cunard and White Star, France's Compagnie Générale Transatlantique, Germany's Norddeutscher Lloyd, they were all racing to build bigger, faster, more luxurious vessels. Leviathan was enormous, but she was a pre-war design. She couldn't keep up with the newer ships. And then there was prohibition. From 1920 to 1933, the sale of alcohol was banned in the United States. That ban extended to ships flying the American flag, which meant that first-class passengers aboard Leviathan couldn't get a drink. Meanwhile, on the British and French liners sailing right alongside her, champagne flowed freely. A luxury liner that can't serve alcohol is like a nightclub that can't play music. The wealthy voted with their feet and flocked to European shipping lines. After the 1929 crash, passengers grew even scarcer. By 1934, Leviathan was pulled from service entirely and left to rust in a quiet corner of New York Harbor. In 1938, she was towed to Scotland and scrapped. The company itself staggered through the Depression in a series of painful reorganizations. In 1931, the remaining ships were sold to a new entity registered in Nevada. Throughout the 1930s, United States lines survived by swallowing weaker competitors: the American Line, the Baltimore Mail Line, the American Merchant Line, one after another, like a starving fish, eating smaller fish to stay alive. In 1942, the parent company officially renamed itself United States Lines, Inc. By then, nearly every ship in the fleet had been drafted by the government, because the Second World War had begun. Part 3. Machines of War. War was both a catastrophe and a lifeline for United States lines. The company's three main passenger liners, Manhattan, Washington, and America, were all converted into military transports. Manhattan became USS Wakefield, Washington became USS Mount Vernon, America became USS West Point. These ships carried hundreds of thousands of American troops across the Atlantic and into the Pacific. They were no longer floating luxury hotels. Painted in wartime gray, their decks no longer echoed with the laughter of dancing passengers. Instead, they were lined with row after row of military bunks, packed with young men waiting to go ashore. During the war, USS Wakefield caught fire at sea and nearly sank. All 1,500 passengers were rescued, but the ship was severely damaged. After repairs, she went right back into service. When the war ended, the company faced a dilemma. Its ships were old, the pre-war liners were outdated, and the post-war world demanded something new. The company began building a series of smaller cargo ships, all named with the prefix American or Pioneer. But management knew that cargo ships alone wouldn't be enough. To reclaim a place in the transatlantic passenger market, they needed a superliner, a ship faster than Britain's Queen Mary, more advanced than France's Normandy, a ship that would tell the world exactly who ruled the seas. That dream gave birth to one of the most legendary ocean liners ever built. Part 4. SS United States. In 1950, a man named William Francis Gibbs walked into the boardroom of United States Lines. Gibbs was not just any naval architect. He was called the godfather of American shipbuilding, an obsessive perfectionist. Legend has it that his office contained no wood because wood could burn. On the ship he designed, even the coat hangers were metal. The pianos were made of aluminum. The only wooden object aboard was a butcher's cutting board in the galley. The ship he was about to build would carry his obsession into every rivet and weld. Her name, United States. But this was more than a passenger liner. The Cold War was at its peak. The American government paid 2/3 of the ship's $78 million construction cost on one condition: she had to be convertible. Within 48 hours, this luxury liner had to transform into a military transport capable of carrying 15,000 soldiers. Her true top speed was classified. The design of her 5-bladed propellers was a state secret. During construction, security screens surrounded the dry dock at Newport News to keep foreign agents from seeing her hull. On July 3, 1952, SS United States completed her maiden voyage, New York to Southampton, in 3 days, 10 hours, and 40 minutes. She shattered the speed record that Queen Mary had held for 14 years, and she did it by a massive margin. That record still stands today. No passenger liner has ever crossed the Atlantic faster. For the next 17 years, SS United States was the brightest star on the Atlantic. 4 American presidents sailed on her. Hollywood stars, business tycoons, and royalty competed for tickets. Her first-class section had 270 staterooms, each designed by a different decorator. The dining room served Ritz-Carlton caliber meals. Gibbs's extreme fireproofing meant the ship was virtually incombustible, though European passengers, accustomed to the warm wood paneling on Cunard liners, found her interiors cold and sterile. But none of that mattered. What mattered was speed. No competitor could do anything but watch her wake. Then, in 1958, the Boeing 707 began commercial transatlantic service. New York to London. 7 hours, not 5 days. Passengers started to disappear. First, the first-class travelers switched to planes, then second class, then third. By the mid-1960s, crossing the Atlantic by ship had gone from mainstream to nostalgic. In November 1969, SS United States completed her final voyage. She was towed to a pier in Virginia and left there. No farewell ceremony, no final blast of the horn. Her designer, Gibbs, had died 2 years earlier. He never saw his masterpiece abandoned. Part 5. The Father of Containerization. For the next 9 years, United States Lines quietly operated as a cargo company. The passenger era was over. The company had pivoted to container shipping, running freight across the world's major trade routes. Then, in 1978, a 65-year-old man entered the picture. Malcolm McLean. To understand what happened next, you need to know this man's story. McLean was born in Maxton, a small town in rural North Carolina. After high school, his family couldn't afford to send him to college, so he pumped gas at a service station. In 1934, at the age of 21, he scraped together $120 and bought a used truck. In 1937, McLean was hauling cotton bales to the docks in Hoboken, New Jersey. He arrived and waited and waited. Hour after hour, he sat in his truck watching longshoremen unload cargo to the old-fashioned way, lifting crates one by one with rope slings and lowering them into the ship's hold. He waited all day. And in that moment, an idea struck him. Why not just lift the entire truck trailer onto the ship? It took 19 years for that idea to become reality. But when it did, it changed the world. On April 26, 1956, McLean's converted oil tanker, Ideal X, sailed from Newark, carrying 58 standard containers. Traditional cargo handling cost $5.86 per ton. Container shipping? 15 cents. McLean's company, Sealand, quickly became the largest container shipping operation on the planet. By the late 1960s, he had 27,000 containers, 36 ships, and access to over 30 ports. In 1969, tobacco giant R.J. Reynolds bought Sealand for $160 million. McLean became very rich. In 1982, Forbes listed him among the 400 wealthiest Americans, with a net worth of $400 million. But he couldn't sit still. In 1978, McLean purchased United States Lines. Why would a 65-year-old man who had already built and sold the largest shipping company in the world buy another one? The answer? He saw another opportunity. And this time, he was going to bet even bigger. In the late 1970s, global oil prices were surging. McLean believed they would keep climbing all the way to $100 a barrel. Based on that belief, he devised a bold plan: build a fleet of massive, ultra-fuel-efficient container ships, sacrifice speed for fuel savings, launch an around-the-world service. When oil hit the stratosphere, every other shipping line would buckle under fuel costs, and his slow but sipping giants would be the last ones standing. He called them Ekin ships. 12 vessels, each one 57,000 gross tons, each carrying 4,400 standard containers. At the time, the largest cargo ships ever built. The order went to Daewoo Shipbuilding in South Korea. Total investment, over $1 billion. Under McLean's leadership, United States Lines expanded from a modest fleet to 43 vessels. He also acquired 2 competitors, Moore McCormick Lines and Delta Steamship Lines. By 1985, United States Lines was one of the biggest ocean carriers in America. Everything looked perfect. Part 6. A billion-dollar grave. In June 1984, the first Ekin ship entered service. That same month, disaster struck. OPEC members turned on each other. Saudi Arabia opened the taps to flood the market and crush its rivals. Oil prices didn't climb to $100 a barrel. They collapsed. from over $30 to under $10. McLean had bet on high oil prices. He got low ones. Low oil prices changed everything. Suddenly, the faster, fuel-hungry ships operated by competitors became cheap to run again. And the fatal flaw of McLean's Ekin ships was laid bare. They were too slow. These giants could only manage 16 knots. Competitors ran at 20 knots or more. In container shipping, speed is money. The slower your ship, the longer cargo sits at sea, the longer your customers wait, and the worse your turnover. It got worse. The Ekin ships were so enormous that many ports simply couldn't handle them. Some harbors were too shallow. Some cranes couldn't reach across their massive decks. Industry analysts had questioned these ships from the start. They said the vessels were underpowered and difficult to maneuver. McLean didn't listen. He had bet right once before, with the container revolution. He trusted his gut. This time, his gut was wrong. Debt spiraled out of control. The billion-dollar fleet investment became a $1.3 billion black hole. International freight rates were falling. The new ships couldn't find enough cargo to fill their holds. Every day, these colossal econ ships sailed the oceans half empty, burning through cash. On November 24th, 1986, United States Lines filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. It was the largest shipping bankruptcy in American history. That record wouldn't be broken until Hanjin Shipping collapsed in South Korea 30 years later. 43 ships, thousands of jobs, an entire row of piers in New York, all swallowed by legal proceedings. And those 12 econ ships? Some were sold. Most were structurally modified by their new owners and within a few years sent to the scrapyard. $1 billion. 12 floating tombs. Closing. Malcolm McLean lost everything in the bankruptcy. But he didn't disappear. In 1991, at 78 years old, he started yet another company, Trailer Bridge, running cargo between the U.S. mainland and Puerto Rico. He remains the only person in American business history to have founded 3 separate companies that were each listed on the New York Stock Exchange. On May 25, 2001, McLean died at his home in Manhattan. He was 87. That day, container ships around the world sounded their horns in tribute. As for the company itself, the name United States Lines was briefly revived in 2000 when a firm called American Classic Voyages used it to run cruises in Hawaii. By 2001, that venture had also gone bankrupt. In 2003, the French shipping giant CMA-CGM launched a subsidiary called U.S. Lines LLC. In 2016, that name was retired too. And SS United States, the legendary speed record holder, sat rusting at a Philadelphia pier for 28 years. In 2025, she was towed to Alabama for dismantling, bound to be sunk off the Florida coast as an artificial reef. From 1917, when the first German ships were seized, to 1986, when the bankruptcy was filed, United States Lines existed for 65 years. It witnessed America transform from a nation with barely a merchant fleet into the ruler of the Atlantic, and then back into a nation with almost no ocean liners at all. Leviathan was taken from the enemy. SS United States was built with taxpayer money. The econ ships were gambled into existence on borrowed cash. Taken, built, gambled. 3 eras, 3 methods, the same ending. Some companies don't just tell their own story. They tell the story of an entire country.